Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a deeply unsettling source that recounts two unresolved paranormal cases. We'll be neutrally examining these spine-chilling claims, unpacking the information exactly as the source presents it. Our goal here? To explore the anatomy of these narratives and really understand the sheer scale of the terror they describe. Let's get right into it.
Right off the bat, the source material establishes this atmosphere of inescapable dread. You know how most stories like this usually end with a triumphant exorcism or some cinematic victory? Well, this one immediately subverts those expectations. It makes it incredibly clear that this narrative does not follow a typical resolution. There is no happy ending here, folks.
Section 1. Mysteries of the Unseen World.
To set the stage, the explainer first anchors us with a visceral, isolated case from Potati village. It really establishes the unforgiving rules of this unseen world. According to eyewitness accounts, a group of teenagers visiting the village stumbled upon a young girl who was completely possessed, and the details are wild. She was reportedly defying gravity, jumping double her own height into the air, and get this, she was speaking in a deep, booming man's voice. The entity inside her was demanding vengeance, claiming he had been murdered for money and was now targeting the perpetrator's daughter for absolute revenge.
This encounter really illustrates the terrifying, almost physically impossible nature of the possession. When a local mystic tried to intervene, the entity demanded a massive feast. The narrative gives us these hyper-specific, horrifying sensory details. Imagine this: 4 kilograms of barfy sweets, crushed into one massive ball by this young girl's small hands and eaten all at once. Then she took 2 entire buckets of milk, mixed in 2 huge boxes of sugar, lifted them with her bare hands, and literally chugged the whole thing. It's just staggering to picture.
The local mystic ultimately failed to help, and physical obstacles mysteriously prevented the family from reaching a major spiritual healing center. So to this very day, the girl's survival allegedly depends entirely on exactly 3 amulets tied to her body, one on her arm, one on her leg, and one on her neck. If even a single one of these 3 comes off, say during play or just daily life, the source claims the spirit instantly takes over again, leaving her trapped in this permanent state of peril.
Section 2. A Family's Curse. We now pivot to a sprawling, multi-generational saga concerning a boy named Vivek. To truly grasp the sheer scale of this horror, we need to trace the timeline chronologically. It all begins with a seemingly mundane event back in 2001, a theft of 20,000 rupees. But watch how this petty crime spirals into a cursed wedding in 2005 and ultimately leads to complete financial and familial ruin by the year 2025. It's a 25-year nightmare born from just a single isolated dispute.
The narrative outlines a very clear cause and effect escalation here. In 2001, Vivek's family had 20,000 rupees stolen. Seeking help from a spiritual guide known as a Guru Ma, Vivek's father set a rather clever trap. He hung a cursed 500 rupee note on a tree outside his home. When a neighbor was magically compelled to steal it, he was caught red-handed. But the father didn't just stop at catching them. He hurled severe verbal abuse at the guilty neighbors. And in retaliation for this massive humiliation, the neighbors initiated what is called a Maran Kriya, a deadly black magic spell directed squarely at Vivek's mother.
As Vivek's mother fell violently ill, the family desperately sought help. The source details a really stark contrast in spiritual authority here. First, they visited a local mystic, a Siddhi Purush. But the multiple dark entities possessing the mother actually laughed at him, mocking his much weaker power. Realizing they were completely outmatched, the family traveled all the way to Punjab to see a highly powerful Guruji. This Guruji reportedly controlled a massive army of spirits of his own, and by merely revealing his spiritual forces, he commanded the dark entities to leave the mother's body.
Section 3. From Bihar to Punjab.
Attempting to outrun the curse, the family arranged a hasty marriage for their eldest son, Pradeep, back in their home state of Bihar. But unfortunately, this inadvertently expanded the battlefield, weaponizing mundane, everyday things. Enemies from Punjab allegedly colluded with distant relatives in Bihar. Right in the middle of the wedding festivities, a seemingly friendly relative fed Pradeep a cursed beetle leaf, or pan. Even more sinister, a traditional wedding ritual, throwing colored mud on the new bride, was totally hijacked by the bride's own side of the family to act as a vehicle for a dark, binding possession spell.
The narrative then describes a rapid, terrifying escalation of madness right after the wedding. As the newlyweds were driving away, the bride suddenly became possessed on a bridge. The entity demanded sweet lattos, which the terrified groom quickly threw into the river just to appease it. But the peace didn't last long at all. Upon arriving at their home, the new bride began fighting violently with everyone. In one horrific incident, she threw a scalding hot cooking pan at young Vivek and then literally ran out to hurl herself into a deep canal attempting to end her own life.
The family soon uncovered a shocking betrayal. The source claims that the bride's own grandfather, the Nana, had actually orchestrated the possession. He allegedly despised Pradeep and intended to use this possession to eventually sacrifice him. When Vivek's family found this out and demanded a divorce, the grandfather took his daughter back, but left them with this chilling vow. I am taking my girl back, but I will completely ruin you. Section 4. War of Dark Magic. This brings us to what is essentially a terrifying spiritual arms race. The hostile neighbors back in Punjab and the vengeful former in-laws in Bihar joined forces, bombarding Vivek's family with relentless supernatural attacks. In a desperate attempt to cleanse Pradeep, the family traveled to a sacred pond in Chinpurni, a place known for binding dark forces. And it seemingly worked. They successfully trapped 300 cursed spirits sent by the grandfather. However, the accounts state that one highly intelligent, incredibly powerful entity evaded the trap entirely by just choosing to stay behind at the house. When the family returned home, thinking they were finally safe, the lone entity immediately possessed Pradeep again. It straight up mocked the family's attempt to escape, bluntly stating that while they thought they were so clever for trapping 300 spirits, 500 more would arrive by that very evening to completely destroy them. Talk about a gut punch.
The sheer physical power of this possession is absolutely terrifying. That evening, Pradeep's younger brother brought several friends over to physically restrain him. They actually managed to tie Pradeep to a chair using thick, heavy iron chains. But the text states that the entity inside Pradeep was entirely unfazed. In just 2 seconds, without even breaking a sweat, he effortlessly snapped those iron chains and walked over to them, completely lucid. It proved, without a doubt, that physical restraints were utterly useless against this unseen force.
Then, the narrative takes a staggering twist. The family tried to return to their powerful Guruji for help, only to learn he had died under mysterious circumstances. With their protector gone, things went off the rails. Pradeep began acting erratically, scattering household rations across the yard as offerings to the dark entities surrounding them. But then the deceased Guruji's spirit allegedly possessed Vivek's mother to continue offering protection from beyond the grave. Through her, the Guruji predicted that 2 of their mortal enemies would die the very next day at exactly 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. And according to the narrative, these predictions came true with terrifying precision. One enemy died in his sleep, and another was crushed under a tractor at those exact times.
Section 5. Unsolved and Terrifying Ending. Now you might think the Guru's protection from beyond the grave would finally end the horror, right? Well, just 2 months after claiming victory over the enemies, the Guru's spirit returned to possess the mother once more. But this time, he was weeping. The accounts detail that the remaining enemies had executed a devastating Masan Kriya, which is a powerful graveyard spell. This dark magic permanently bound and tortured the Guru's spirit in the afterlife, effectively neutralizing the family's only source of spiritual protection.
With their ultimate spiritual shield broken and their protector held hostage in the spirit realm, the raw physical danger returned immediately. The source describes a horrifying daytime attack where young Vivek, just playing in a field, was suddenly grabbed by unseen forces. He was violently dragged across the dirt and left bloodied and battered as a warning that the dark entities were now in total control.
The real-world toll this unseen war has taken is just devastating. By the year 2025, Vivek's family has reportedly spent over 50 lakh rupees. To put that into perspective, that's 5 million rupees spent on countless failed spiritual remedies, desperate trips to mystics, and medical bills. They've had to sell off their ancestral lands, their homes, and have entirely lost any hope for a peaceful resolution.
The source leaves us with a deeply grim reality check. Like we mentioned earlier, there is absolutely no cinematic victory to be found here. Today, Vivek is the last one remaining in his home, totally isolated in a never-ending horror story. The narrative claims he is currently contemplating ending his own life, completely exhausted and stuck in a 25-year spiritual war with no solution, no saviors, and no end in sight.
We'll wrap up this explainer with a profound thought directly derived from this chilling narrative. When the protector becomes the hostage, where does hope remain? This source forces us to neutrally examine a deeply unsettling question about the absolute limits of protection and the terrifying endurance of malice. It really leaves us questioning just how vulnerable we might be to the unseen forces described in these accounts. Thank you so much for joining me today as we unpacked these startling claims. See you next time.